Manchester United are determined to prove that they mean business this summer. Romano confirms we're monitoring Xavi Simons. More reports of a possible swap deal involving Osimhen and Garnacho. Internal discussions over a move for Liam Delap. United remain interested in James Trafford. And United's academy recruitment team are looking for an ambitious summer. All this plus more in today's video as we run through all the latest Manchester United news and transfer news that will keep you right up to date with everything. Welcome to Man United Review. My name's Jamie. Before we get into it, smash a like on the video. Let's jump straight into it. So firstly, give us your thoughts on the game and the result and the performance last night. It'd be interesting to read your comments and have a chat with you in the comments around the performance and the match last night. For me, I actually felt we played good for large parts of that game. I felt, especially in the first half, more so. Sometimes you lose a game that you shouldn't lose, and I think that was the case last night. I don't think we deserved to lose. I thought we actually deserved to win. We definitely deserved a draw at the very least. But football, sometimes you don't always get what you deserve in football. And, the reality for me is the problems with the squad are there. It's been there all seasons. Why stop doing match reactions? Because we simply just cannot score goals. That's the problem at United. The one thing that I did kind of feel last night, let me know what you feel about this below, is it became glaringly obvious to me that I just think that there's a massive lack of cohesion in our forwards. And I don't think their profiles are suited to each other's games. And it's a complete mismatch because you've got Garnacho that's very selfish and just wants to score for himself. You've got Xerxes, who's playing obviously at the striker in the first half, that wants to drop deep and is not in the penalty area. And then I think you've got Bruno, who would prefer to play with a striker that's maybe looking to run in behind, like he did with Martial, where he used to lay on a lot of assists for Martial because Martial was always on the line of the last defender looking to break in, and that plays to Bruno's strengths. And I just don't think the three forwards that we played last night actually suit each other's style of play because they're a complete mismatch. And it was the same for when Højlund comes on as well. Like, it's just like none of them are coherent together, and they don't I don't think they suit each other's strengths. And there's got to be something that kind of we need to address in the transfer window, because we do need, we need players that can play to each other's strengths. Like if you've got a goal scorer that's a penalty box striker, for example, you need somebody that's able to beat a man and cut the ball back into the 6-yard box for him to score the goals. And we don't have that, in my opinion. And the lack of goals, it's just incredibly frustrating, isn't it, as well? Like, if we could score, even we scored half of our chances. We had 3 big chances last night, scored none, and obviously conceded the goal on the counter-attack as well, which played exactly into Nottingham Forest's hands, because that's what they're very good at. That's why they're third in the league, because they defend deep, counter-attack, because they've got pace to burn up front. Obviously, in Anthony Elanga, I think he clocked like a record or something for dribbling with the ball or something last night for his goal. And fair play for that as well. But yeah, the forward line for me. But other than that, I thought we had some really nice football in spells, specifically in the first half. I felt our passing was a lot better. We looked kind of, there's signs of progress. The league's a write-off now anyway. It doesn't matter if we win every game between now and the end of the season. We're not exactly going to move outside of much where we are now. Like, we're not going to get into the top 8 or anything like that at all. So the league is effectively, like a pre-season game. It's still shit when you lose, though. It still pisses you off, especially when you've waited like 2.5 weeks and then you lose. It's really frustrating and really annoying. And Amram kind of said the same thing, though, as well. He said, we're improving in our way of playing and we must improve our way of scoring goals. It is something that we clearly need to improve. So Amram's obviously aware of the issues in the squad, and I think anyone with half an eye can see what the issues are with United, and it's a legacy issue. It's been the same all season. I don't necessarily think it's a system issue. I think it's a personnel issue, because we was exactly the same under Eric Ten Hag as well. And I don't think we need to get better players in, don't we, with better decision making and with better quality in that kind of final third. And that's the hardest part of football, scoring goals. But that's the one where we just seem to be lacking the most as well, which is incredibly frustrating. And that's why you get results like we did last night, in my opinion. But yeah, give us your thoughts. Give us your thoughts in the comments. Be interesting to hear your opinion on that. Obviously, the player that's under the most scrutiny, I would say, after last night, Alejandro Garnacho, he was incredibly frustrating as well. His decision making sometimes is well, shit, isn't it? Let's be honest. I thought on the right, he's been playing a little bit better recently because it's, it's taken away one of his weaknesses, which is cutting inside and ballooning the ball over all the time on his right foot when he plays on the left. And then I felt the first half he was playing on the right was a little bit kind of sloppy, I felt, with his touches and stuff. Put some crosses in, but he had like 0 successful crosses as well. And then on the second half, when he was played on the left, just kept cutting inside and ballooning the ball over the bar all the time, which is exactly the frustration that I used to have with Anthony, because he used to just cut inside his left foot and balloon the ball over the bar all the time. And there comes a question where you're like, hold on, where do you draw the line between being biased and favoritism and stuff? Like, I was critical of Anthony for that. I'll be critical of Garnacho for doing exactly the same thing as well. Ruben Amram, on his bad decisions, though, said it can happen in a match. The most important thing for me is that when he has to come back and defend, he does it. Sometimes he overdoes it, but he wants to help the team. He does his best. Sometimes he doesn't make the best choice, but he's not the only one today. So Amram kind of, effectively saying, yeah, he wasn't making the best decisions today as well. And it's just incredibly frustrating, especially when you're doing it so often, because, like, fair enough, couple of shots, because that's what he's about. That's his kind of play style and stuff. But once you've done like a couple and it's not your day, maybe try and play Dorgu in a couple of times, or maybe try passing it a few times and just change your game up as well. And I think that if that doesn't improve between now and the end of the season, there'll be a massive decision, I think, for United to make regarding Garnacho. Obviously, there's always talk about him potentially going anyway, whether that's weighing on his mind as well, whether he's trying to put himself in the shop window or whether he's trying too hard to stay at United. Really, really frustrating night, though, I thought, for Garnacho. But there were a few poor performances in the forward line, just in general, but that's just how we are. But give us your thoughts on the match in the comments. Now let's go through the transfer stuff. So, Manchester United are determined to prove they mean business this summer, but there is still a realisation it will rely on them making the Champions League. For Manchester United's best transfer plans to take shape, the financial boost of Champions League football is a must. Winning the Europa League would secure their return to Europe's elite competition and unlock the kind of spending power needed to attract top-tier talent. If they do qualify, expect a major push for a marquee striker like Victor Osimhen, who is currently on loan at Galatasaray from Napoli, along with significant reinforcements in other key areas. Regardless of their financial constraints, insiders believe the Red Devils will aim to bring in 5 new signings this summer, carefully balancing the books to strengthen the squad. So what this report was saying is effectively, if we get Champions League football, then expect maybe a marquee striker like a Victor Osimhen or someone of that ilk. But also, regardless of that, though, even with the financial constraints or with no European football, they're still going to aim to bring in 5 new signings this summer. And that is why I think we're getting all these conflicting stories around, Osimhen and Gyökeres and Ekitike and players like that are a little bit more expensive, but then also at the same time getting linked with like Liam Delap and Mateta and players like that are a little bit less expensive. Because I think United are planning for 2 scenarios. Obviously, they're planning for a transfer window with no Champions League football and a reduced budget, and then also planning for a potential Champions League summer where you might be able to go out and spend a little bit more on marquee players or on high-profile players that can obviously push. Because the Muppeteers were saying something interesting the other day around Champions League, that and what he was saying is that if United do qualify for the Champions League, the club are determined to stay in the Champions League, so they might have a big summer. So Champions League football is obviously massively important. Please, God, let's win the Europa League. Like, that would just, evaporate this shitness of a season that it has been. If we can come away with it with a trophy in Champions League football, I would just literally delete this season from memory. Apart from that, I would forget everything else apart from the Europa League, because the rest of the Premier League season has been absolute turd. Come on, and we are unbeaten in Europe as well. Let's be positive, right? Positivity spreads positivity. So only unbeaten team in Europe. So come on, we've got a hope for that. But then also United are planning for if they don't as well. So that'll be really kind of interesting to see. And I think that's why we're getting all these kind of mixed messages, because we're planning for scenario A and scenario B. But interesting, the 5 key signings or 5 signings this summer regardless. The report also went on to say a new midfield partner for Manuel Ugarte is on the wish list, along with a creative attacker and a defensive reinforcement. Manchester United's season is shaping up to be a crucial one as they push for the Champions League, platform needed to truly flex their muscle. Now, that came from Dean Jones. Dean Jones is actually a decent journalist, not the most credible, though. So, but it's widely reported the 5-position striker we know is obviously the priority. Number 10 is the other priority, midfielder and defender. That's widely kind of reported. And then the 5th kind of signing, I think, is a toss-up between a right back or a right wing back and a goalkeeper. I would say, in reading between the lines and going off recent reports, I think it's a toss-up then between a goalkeeper and a right wing back. If we can get a cheap goalkeeper and we get like an offer for Onana and stuff, then I think that might be plausible. Or if not, maybe a right wing back would be another kind of position, or maybe even another attacker to kind of bring in. But I think they're the kind of five positions that we're looking to kind of strengthen. On the striker situation, though, as well, Romano said Manchester United have added 4 to 5 names to their striker target list and will make a decision based on budget availability. So Romano kind of confirming the story as well, saying, look, we're looking at different types of profile of strikers depending on the fees and budget and stuff like that available. And that's why I think we're getting all these conflicting stories around, 60 odd million for Ekitike and then, 20 odd million for Mateta as an example for that, because I do think they're planning for the different kind of scenarios. Just on the goalkeeper situation, Newcastle and Manchester United remain interested in a summer deal for Burnley goalkeeper James Trafford. So that came from Sky, confirming that United are still potentially interested in bringing in Trafford. That's a name that's been linked a lot in terms of like the goalkeeper. Whether he would be coming in as our number one or as a backup, we'll need to wait and see, because I think that depends on obviously Onana and the Bayinda situation as well. But, no smoke without fire when it comes to James Trafford. Now, the first team's not necessarily the only position in the squad that are looking for an ambitious summer. So United's academy recruitment department are gearing up for an ambitious summer transfer window as they look to bring in some of the country's biggest talents to Carrington. Primarily, work has begun for a number of highly rated players. They're hoping to be a competitive force in the market comparable with that of Manchester City and Chelsea in recent years. Last summer's deal to sign Chido represents the standard of player the club are aiming to recruit. Now, that came from Academy Scoop, and I like that as well, boosting up the kind of academy recruitment, bringing in the likes of, Lascelles and James Overy and Chido, these sort of players, going out and getting some of the best young players in the country as a way to boost our under-18s and reserves and stuff like that as well. Again, I like that idea because it is an area, although we've done quite well at that kind of age group, City and Chelsea are kind of hoovering up these kind of young talents, and United are looking to get back to doing that as well, as bringing the players to United. And I think that can only help us out in the future as well. But that's obviously a long-term kind of project to see the fruits of that. But, it's the right kind of approach for me, going out and getting the best young players around if we can, which would be really kind of key. Now, in other transfer news, Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal and Chelsea are monitoring Xavi Simons, who could be available for around £60 million this summer. Sources believe the Premier League would be a credible possible destination for for Simons. Now, that came from Fabrizio Romano, confirming that United are interested or monitoring the Xavi Simons situation. I think, though, with Liverpool, Arsenal and Chelsea, of course, Chelsea are interested because they don't have any attacking players to kind of bring in, and they're just literally, I just assume that if they're not at United, Chelsea are going to be signing them at the moment with their recruitment strategy. That's going to be difficult for us to maybe compete with those sort of teams. But again, that goes back to the story earlier. Depends on our budget, depends on Champions League. Maybe if we get Champions League football, or maybe not even just Champions League, actually. Maybe that's why we're getting links with like Garnacho go in and Mainu go in, that maybe if we don't get Champions League, they are going to look to maybe sell some players in order to create more budget to kind of, that will give us a bit more flexibility in the transfer market. That can't be ruled out as a possibility as well. I like Xavi Simons. I think he'd be a good kind of player. The key for me in terms of like his stats and data and stuff, right, is his expected assisted goals. He's in the top 95%. We need somebody that creates chances for others. And that puts him up amongst one of the best in Europe or in the top 5 leagues. His progressive passes, he's in the top 90% as well. His passes attempted, the top 88%. And also is in the top percentiles for his defensive work as well. His interceptions, clearances, and strangely aerials one are very good as well. And that is the kind of profile I think that we're kind of needing. Someone that can progress the ball and can create chances for others. And Xavi Simons, is amongst the kind of the best in Europe statistically wise for doing that. 26 appearances, 8 goals, 5 assists this season as well. So I think he would be, I think he'd be a good choice to kind of bring in as one of the kind of attacking tens. But whether United are quite going to have, £60 million available, and it might be more than that if you're competing with the likes of Liverpool, Arsenal, and Chelsea, amongst others, probably for his signature as well. Do we have that kind of financial pull? We'll have to wait and see. But I think he's a player we've been interested in for a while. Even before we went to PSG, we were linked with Xavi Simons. So he's clearly someone we've monitored for a while as well. But give us your thoughts on that below. Now, there was noise yesterday regarding a possible swap deal involving Alejandro Garnacho and Victor Osimhen. Now, that came from Laurie Whitwell yesterday, who's a very credible source for United. Now, Chris Wheeler and Nafe are actually 2 decent sources as well, kind of saying the same thing, that Victor Osimhen is on Manchester United's radar and that could feasibly involve a swap deal including Alejandro Garnacho. So that's 2 kind of decent sources in terms of, like, Chris Wheeler broke the Branthwaite news, and he's broken stories ahead of Ornstein and Romano recently as well regarding United and transfer news, kind of saying that maybe there could be possible. Obviously, it's not going to be a direct swap. It's we buy Osimhen, they buy Garnacho. Swap deals don't kind of happen in real life football. But that, again, plausible, not beyond the realms of kind of impossible as some kind of make weight to help us out in that deal. But the problem with Osimhen is the wages that he's kind of demanding. Are Ineos gonna kind of pay those sort of fees for someone like Osimhen when we're being told they want to reduce the kind of wage bill? But then the argument against, and I've been reading some of your comments, and I kind of it's fair shouts by some of you as well, for top quality players and top strikers, specifically strikers as well. They are costly. Goals win games at the end of the day, and if you've got an elite striker, maybe Ineos would kind of say, okay, well, we're willing to pay maybe a little bit more for the right quality of striker if they're winning us games, but they just don't want to pay, 350 grand a week for a 30-odd-year-old Casemiro who's not really influencing games at the moment. He's not winning us games by himself. Whereas if you paid someone like Osimhen, for example, he might be the difference between winning a game and losing a game. So, proof will be in the pudding. We'll need to wait and see. But what we're being told is they don't want to do that. But whether they would make an exception for somebody, who knows? We'll just have to see how that kind of plays out. On Garnacho, though, Chelsea could revisit a move for Alejandro Garnacho this summer, with Napoli also keen. Obviously, we know there's interest from Napoli. Whether they'll readdress that in the summer, whether United will look at it again in the summer, depending obviously on Garnacho's form between now and the end of the season, or if we do want to raise some capital. If we don't get Champions League, maybe that becomes more likely that we'd look to sell Garnacho because it represents obviously PSR profit. And Chelsea obviously need wingers, don't they? They've got no young wingers at all in their squad. So that could be, so they definitely would need to bring in someone like Garnacho because they haven't got any young wingers coming into Chelsea at all, have they? But give us your thoughts on that below. And finally, Liam Delap is probably, I would say, maybe the more realistic striker, the one that's more kind of heavily linked, I would say, with United at the moment, and obviously what we're being told around budget and cost and stuff like that as well. So Chris Wheeler had the following to say: Manchester United have held more discussions internally over a potential summer move for Liam Delap. He has a release clause in the region of £40 million if Ipswich are relegated this season. United will face competition to sign Delap from a number of rivals, including Chelsea, obviously, Liverpool, Newcastle, and his old club Manchester City, who have a buyback option on him. Now, that will throw a spanner in the works. That's been my biggest fear with Liam Delap, is the fact that City have a buyback clause. They could buy him back and sell him on if they want to, and that would be profit for them from a PSR perspective because he's a homegrown player. They might want to buy him back and keep him as a rotation option for Erling Haaland. That's a bit of a kind of concern. Obviously, I think for someone like Delap, who's a little bit less expensive, maybe we could compete with Liverpool, Newcastle, and Chelsea in terms of transfer fee and wages, but would he want to come to United if we've got no European football ahead of somebody like a Luton, like Liverpool, for example? Yeah, we'll have to kind of wait and see. Maybe the relationship with Jason Wilcox, though, will give us a bit of an upper hand in regarding that one, but we need to wait and see. But as Romano said, there's 4 or 5 strikers on the list at the moment. It just depends on budget and availability and all of that kind of stuff, which is why we're getting linked with a lot of strikers at the moment. And then the final story I've got for you is regarding Diao. So Manchester United look to be showing an increasing interest in the potential transfer of highly rated young Como winger Assane Diao. United have recently had scouts watch Diao play in Serie A, and the club have received positive reports. That came from Ekram Connor. I'm still yet to be convinced by Ekram Connor because he's linked us with about 1 million players over the last few weeks. He's got a large following though, gets reposted a lot by aggregator accounts and stuff. But, maybe that's one that we could potentially... We've been linked with Diao, I think, before. And ironically, Betis sold him to Como to get the money in to sign Anthony on loan. And now we might be signing Diao, and Betis want to maybe sign Anthony on a permanent basis as well. That would be like a weird little merry-go-round for players, wouldn't it? But yeah, need to keep an eye on it. He looks a promising player. But yeah, need to keep an eye on it for you. Give us your thoughts on that in the comments below. Give us your thoughts on all the other topics discussed in today's video, because as you all up to date with the latest Manchester United news and transfer news, smash a like on the video on your way out, subscribe to the channel if you're new. See you in the next one.